You need to remember the problem, the big picture here for just a second. If you guys ask any of your customers the question, how much time do you plan on spending to do system integration, getting everything working together, software, electronics, mechanics, all working together? What do you think the answer is going to be? Don't everybody answer at once. But our experience has been they're going to spend half their program schedules getting everything working together. That's what they will do. And you can ask the question, well, the next question you could ask is, why would you put up with that? And they don't have any solution to that. And it's literally putting companies out of business. So here's why they're having this problem. This is a typical standard development V. We can have arguments about whether the V is real or otherwise, but to get this point across, they're living in these silos. They keep the requirements in one silo, their targets somewhere else, their test cases yet another place, manufacturing plants somewhere else. And the result is there's no single source of truth. There may be lessons learned, but they can't find them. There's no traceability across these domains, and we got many different repositories. And so they're going to spend half their time getting everything working together on the right side of the V. That's what they will do. And they have built it into their practices. They plan for it and everything else. And in the old days, you used to be able to get away with that, but you can't afford to do that anymore. Here's an example. This is a Mitsubishi space jet, regional jet that they were building in Japan. They called it off. They killed it last year, February, and they wrote off $7.6 billion on that program. So it's going to require a change in their practice. You have to move to, and what we've been talking about in all our discussions is this idea of a digital thread running through this V, if you will, supported by Team Center behind it to carry all that information to all the right places and all the right plan. The goal being here that when we get there, we'll have this real-time impact understanding of when something changes on the left-hand side of the requirement, where does it go? We can understand now versus later. We have this ability to do continuous integration, the ability to understand what's going to be impacted and make sure we're all integrated continuously rather than trying to figure it out on the right side of the V. And of course, this needs to be under enterprise services kind of control, like configuration and change and workflow, all the kinds of things you need to do. And of course, it's not an enterprise itself, an organization itself that has this problem. It's the entire supply chain we're talking about here, right? And it turns out the Team Center, of course, has the ability to support supply chains carrying these digital threads that we're currently busy working on and getting communicated to everybody. And this is important because these suppliers are actually contributing 60 to 70% of the value of a product today. So for example, if I ask Piyush how much is contributed in the automotive industry by suppliers to the automotive, and he'll tell me 60 to 70% of the value of what's showing up in the finished vehicle is provided by suppliers. Okay, so that's the problem we're having. The question then on the table is how do they move from this 50% of their time doing all this integration work to this integrated digital thread? Now, our solutions hopefully are staying ahead of them, but essentially what we found out is that even if we delivered this, if all the things that Pascal's been talking about here were ready to go today, they would not be able to use them because they're not mature enough to be able to implement the solutions that we would have for them. They're living down here in the bottom. And so many of you guys have seen this idea of the MBSE maturity assessment that we came up with. That's this, let me get my marker out here. This is the stuff here on the, let me see if we get there. On the left-hand side are the things that systems engineers are supposed to be doing per the ISO standards, IEEE 1220 and others. For example, they keep up with the requirements, they define the parameters, they understand the functions, the features, you get the idea, interfaces, and so forth and so on. So what we did is we could be doing this job if I look at the technical aspects. So let's just look at requirements here, for example. Requirements could be managed in uncontrolled spreadsheets. They could be done in documents in SharePoint. They could be done in standalone requirement tools. Doors and others are out there. But as we move from left to right, our goal here is to get systems engineering integrated with the product lifecycle in such a way that a change in one domain is reflected in other domains so they understand what the impacts are today versus later. That's the problem with systems engineering. Even making no decision is a decision. So we want these requirements to show up at the right place at the right time. For example, inside of math models, CAD models, those kinds of things. The best of all worlds is an individual requirement is showing up inside the product baseline. If I can get it inside the product baseline, inside the lifecycle, that means I can tie a requirement to a task in a program schedule or to a test case or to a manufacturing process. You get the idea. So you get this continuous ability to do traceability. Okay. The problem is that our customers, even though we're working towards having these solutions as Joe and others are describing, getting them up here to where they belong, they're not ready to accept that. So let's take interfaces just for example. Today, interfaces are typically managed inside of interface control documents. 95% of the world does it that way if they're doing it. And then, of course, from there, we move from there to individual interfaces to libraries. The best of all worlds that we were just having this conversation about with Capital would be that I have a functional architecture, and when I allocate a function to something to do that job, I create an interface. And if I've done my job right, that interface would flow through the entire practice all the way down into Capital, and I could ask a wire, what are you doing here? And it could tell me what function is supporting coming across that wire. And that's an incredibly valuable thing. But even if I had that capability up here, our customers are down here in interface control documents, and making this leap from here all the way up to there is impossible. Okay, so our goal would be to make sure everyone understands MBSE or model-based systems engineering is not a tool, it is a journey. And so the goal would be to think about it differently. Let's find out where you are, and let's take you on the right. So for example, I could take these interface control documents, given the fact that our Team Center now can support interfaces, let's rip it, and let's get those interfaces established inside of Team Center so they're now under control, have history, change, the whole experience, and then take them on a step-by-step journey, which is what we're going to need to do to help these organizations change how they do it from their document-oriented way to a model-based way of doing this job, okay? And so we've been out and we've talked to many different industries, and we've drawn some lines. This is the best we've ever seen in aero. This is the best we've ever seen in auto. Everybody else is down here. Everybody is challenged. Everybody, for example, 95.6% of everyone is managing their interfaces with documents. 96.5% of everyone is managing parameters and controlled spreadsheets of some kind. You get the idea here. So now we're talking about a different kind of practice. We're talking about not only the tools itself and the features that it has, but we're talking about helping our customers make this embrace this practice from left going from left to right. So that means, for example, I can tell what tools they're using today, Excel, Word, and so forth, and they're asking for these interfaces that Pascal was describing as a no-win situation. We don't want to go there. We need to go from this idea of PLM to what we call system lifecycle management, where we're talking about not only managing the data, the CAD data, those kinds of things, but the interrelationships, the interactions, the digital threads across the entire lifecycle. And so what we do is we go through these, do this as a general practice. When we start down here, we find out where they are. We can predict where they are, but we can find out where they are. Now we have a different conversation. We say, okay, you're managing your parameters here in 600 different spreadsheets. Let's agree on what that spreadsheet should look like and what the data model should be. Let's get all those agreed to list of parameters into Team Center, and let's just take that step, just one. Let's get our act together on parameters. By the way, because parameters aren't showing up at the right place at the right time, we have all kinds of downstream problems. Like, for example, I had one automotive customer tell me they just finished a crash test with the wrong set of parameters. Okay. So the idea here is that we get parameters in a known good sense inside of Team Center under product configuration, the whole experience. Once we get that done, we can have another conversation. What about requirements outside the product lifecycle? Let's get them moved into so they can participate in the configuration baseline. And now we can begin to get some traceability when I link requirements to test cases, to manufacturing processes, to tasks and program schedules, etc. So when a requirement changes, I now get an implication or indication of all the places it goes now versus later. And then, of course, the next question people ask is, where's my test stats? To manage typically outside the product lifecycle. Let's get those captured, and let's get them tied to the test cases they're supposed to be the requirements they're supposed to be validating. And now we can start thinking differently about it. If I ask anybody in the test organization, I know Mark Malinowski's on here, he can tell me the same thing. When we change something, we test everything every time because we don't know where that change goes. Now imagine the value you would get if you could just test just those things that are impacted by a change. By the way, systems engineers will spend a quarter to a third of their time keeping up with change. That's what they do for a living. And then, of course, we want to get them out of Visio diagrams into some kind of system model, so we now have the product architecture. You get the idea. And so now it's a different kind of a practice. It's not only as we got the tools that are very capable of doing this job, but we got to help our customers along in this journey as well. And that's how we get traction for our solutions. Otherwise, they sit around and wringing their hands about where to start. So that's what we've come up with, a standard kind of development practice or implementation practice that you guys have probably seen, where you begin with getting your requirements and parameters under control. You move from there into the architecture, from there up into the reuse or spreading it out to your supply chains and getting to this vision that you guys have been hearing so much about with the digital twin. And that practice is a combination now of not only the tools, but also our help to help these people along in this journey. So I wanted to take the last minutes of Tony offered it up, and I thought, well, let's take some time and remind you guys about the big picture of the problem you're solving for your customer. We're after cutting half their program schedules that they're currently spending, getting everything working together. That's our goal. So with that, I guess, if there are any comments or questions, please feel free to offer them up. Otherwise, I guess we can let it go. Piyush, you've been awfully quiet. Mark, you've been quiet too, so.
Well, I love this work you're doing, and I think it's imperative for us to be embracing it more than we are. I think right. I just want to underscore the point you made about if you change something, what do you have to retest? That's like our entire universe. We build these very complex microelectronics, billions of switches in little places on semiconductors that are deciding whether our cars crash or not, or our planes crash or not. And, when we change something, we can't afford to do everything over. We simply can't afford it. So the criticality of us getting that capability is paramount.
So there's plenty of experiences. I shared this one with you guys here. This was the one about this. Here's a quote on one of the parts. The test flights were aborted because air conditioning defects and software problems. It was going to require a redesign. You couldn't afford it anymore, and they are gone. This killed the aerospace business, design business in Japan. Okay? Any other comments or questions? So we're trying to weave this storyline into many of the digital thread campaigns that you guys are beginning to start to see. Remember, our digital threads is a combination of selling requirements and parameters and configuration and simulations and the whole thing. We're trying to make sure that's woven in, because it's not just a tool problem anymore. It's the fact that we need to help our customers along on this journey as well. Okay? If there's no other questions,
bottom line, I see, Mark, is, we as Siemens, I guess, especially team center side of it, we need to, let's say, own the data, right? And right. Not so much as from creation aspect of it, but usage aspect of it. Like, okay, how do you have a requirement? Okay, you can have a requirement, coming in from anywhere. But if we manage it, if we own that and make it available to all the downstream applications or all the downstream engineering domains, then that becomes a lot more value add than just having to, your author.
Absolutely. You gotta know you have the right version, the right data, showing up at the right place at the right time. And that's one aspect. And then what you guys have been hearing about V2 is we will finally have a means of, in a standard way, of finding that information and getting it to the right place in whatever tool it is at the right time to be able to make that help us with us. And that's why V2 is so important. So the V2,
to me, it is basically owning the data with no boundaries kind of thing, right? So, whether it's models or requirements or, specs or, CAD models or documents, it could be anything. In our environment, we would own it and then make it available to anybody downstream with the right, lifecycle management across all domains. That would be like immensely powerful, right? Because that's where the usage comes in.
Okay. Any other comments? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and give you guys, we'll give you any time back. It's time to go, I guess. Everyone, thank you for your time today. Let me know if you have any questions about this. But I just wanted to remind you about what problem you're solving. And you guys should put the challenger question in your wick, I guess, in your pocket, so that when someone say, "What is it you do?" We're after solving this problem that's consuming half of our programs, of our customers' schedules. That's it. Okay, guys, thank you all.